Hello dear students. So in this video we are going to learn the section 5th of ICMR 2017 ethical guidelines. Section 5. What's section 5? That is informed consent. Informed consent. Informed consent process. So we are going to learn in this, we are going to learn the 5 topics here. First one, we are going to learn requestees, or can say requirements for informed consent process. Then second, we are going to learn that's the essential information. Essential information. Essential information for prospective research participant. For participant. The next we will learn in this, that's the responsibility of research. Responsibility of research. Responsibility of research. Next we will see the documentation of informed consent process. Documentation. Then electronic consent. Then spatial issues. Then last one, that's the waiver of consent. So we are going to learn the 7 topics under this section. That's section 5, informed consent process. First, you know what, informed consent process. First, if you see the aim, what this section actually, what's the aim, what's the objective of this section? If you see the aim or objective of this section, so informed consent process, it ensures the research participant, first it ensures that the research participant is voluntary and is well informed and is ethically valid, representing autonomy and dignity of the participants. So aim is, that is voluntary informed consent means to take. So this section, the aim of this section is to ensure that the research participant has understood the research, its risk, its benefits, and is voluntarily providing information consent, and is voluntarily accepting for the participation of the research. So you know that informed consent is a continuous process. So it involves 3 main components. First, it is a continuous process. It involves 3 main components. First one is that providing relevant information to participant. First, we have to provide the information to participant. That's the relevant information to participant about the research, about the purpose of the research, methodology, risk and benefits, everything which is related to research. The researcher has to provide all relevant information to the participant. Then he should ensure that the information is easily and comprehended by the participant. He should ensure participant understood the information. Understood the information. And then we have to ensure that the information is next we will see the first topic which comes in this section, that's requestees. Means we can say the requirements actually. What are the requirements? Okay, so the requirements is, that's 5.1 requestees. Okay, it's actually the requirement is that participant should be capable of providing consent. The participant should be capable of providing consent, and the consent should be voluntary. There should be no any kind of force. And if participant is not capable of providing voluntary consent, then the consent should be from, that's LAR, legal authority representative. and administer consent before initiation of research. And we have to take consent before initiating the research, and we have to ensure the privacy and confidentiality of the participants. Next, we will see the essential information which is given, which can be given to participants. So essential information. So next is 5.2 is essential information. Essential information provided to participants. So first is before requiring consent, we have to provide a detailed information of research to participants. That's information consent document. It consists of two parts. One is PIS, patient information sheet, or we can say participant information sheet. Okay. Then is informed consent form. So ICD, it contains PIS and ICF. PIS, that is participant information sheet. It includes detailed information on known facts about the research, detailed information. Then ICF is that's informed consent form. It includes the participant acknowledges that. It includes the detail that is the participant acknowledged that he or she has understood information and is providing a voluntary consent. Then the ICMR has given a box. In this box, the ICMR have written some essential components. So ICMR is writing here the essential components of ICD. So ICMR is mentioning that essential elements of ICD, informed consent document. Okay. So the elements which are the essential, which are essential and or mandatory. Mandatory is mandatory, and here is also that's called in addition to these. These should be also included. Okay. But the mandatory is that this is the mandatory column, and this is in addition to these. These should be also these informations or elements should be also present during an informed consent document. So first is that it's first it should mention, the informed consent document should mention that that's the statement mentioning that's the research. So we have to ensure that we have to transparently tell, or we can say clearly tell to a patient that this is a research statement of a research. We're doing a research. Okay. The next is that then we have to tell the participants about the purpose of research, methodology of research in a simple language. The next is we have to tell the participants about the expected duration of participation, and frequency of contact. And we have also that's estimated number of participants to be enrolled. We have to also tell about the estimated number of participants which are enrolled, and types of data collection and methods. Then fourth point, the ICMR is mentioning here about we have to mention the benefits of research. The next, risk of research, and then privacy and confidentiality of research, and then payment of participation, and free treatment or any compensation associated with research related harm, and then freedom of the individual to participate and withdraw from the research. And next, 10th one is that's identity of research team and contact. So 10 things they have mentioned. Okay. What's first? That's first one is statement of research. Then second is about the purpose of research, methodology of research, and data collection. And then third one is duration, expected duration, and frequency of contact, and estimated number of participants to be enrolled, and types the data collection. Types of data collection and methods. Then fourth one is benefits. Fifth one is risk. Sixth one is privacy and confidentiality. Seventh one is payment. Eighth one is free treatment and compensation associated with research related to harm. And then ninth one is freedom to participate. Freedom of an individual to participate and withdraw from the research. And 10th one is the identity of research team and contact. So he should participant, he or she should have a proper contact with the research team. And in addition to these mandatory elements, other things which should also include ICD. The first thing is that any alternate procedure or course of treatment that may be advantageous to patient or participant, and if possibility research could lead to if any possibility of if there is any chance or any possibility of research that could lead to stigmatization, example HIV and genetic disorders, which could lead to any possibility which could lead to stigmatization of a research participants. If there is any possibility of such case, then we have it has also to cover about insurance coverage, if any, for research related harm, any insurance coverage, if any, for research related harm. And then forcible extent, if information on forcible extent, that's extent of information, possible extent of information on possible current and future use of extent of information on possible current and future use of biological materials and data generated for research. Forcible extent of information. So forcible extent of information on possible and current, like for example any other information which has to be gathered from biological materials and data generated from the participants, so they have to mention it, like any other use. So this forcible extent of information on possible current and future use of biological materials and data generated for research, it includes actually the period of storage of sample, time period of storage of sample data, and possibility of material being used, and possibility of being material used for a secondary purpose. Then next is whether material is to be shared, it has to be mentioned, whether it is to be shared with others or not, so it has to be mentioned. And right to prevent use his or her biological substance, and it has to mention that he or she is having right to use, right to prevent use of his or her biological sample. And then risk of discovering biologically sensitive and biologically sensitive information and provisions to safeguard them. The next, this has to be also mentioned, that is post-research benefit and post-research plan or benefit sharing. If research is commercialized, if for example research commercialized, then what's the post-research benefit and benefit sharing. Then next is about the publication plan, and if any photography and pedigree chart is to be published, this has also be mentioned. So this, then responsibility of a research. Simple responsibility is responsibility of a research. So next is about the responsibility of research. Responsibility of research is simple, that first we have to take ethical approval, ethical consent, or again ethical committee approved consent forms. So what we have to use, we have to use the consent form, we have to use that should be ethical committee approved consent form. Okay, and there should be no restriction for participant to ask questions. There should be no restrictions, and the researcher should not give unjustifiable assurance, any kind of unjustified assurance that you may get this benefit or like that. So the researcher should not give any kind of unjustified assurance. And the researcher must ensure participant is competent. So the researcher should understood that the participant is competent and has understood the research. That's the purpose of research. When purpose and methodology, all the basic things. When the participant is not competent, then LAR should be there, and that's legal authority represent consent should be taken from them. If both participant, this is the important thing, if the participant and LAR, or we can say illiterate and does not understand the research, then an impartial person, then a person actually who does not belong to the participant and have no connection in any means to the research, and but is literate and is able to understand the research, and is also able to communicate with the participant in his or her own language. So then we can take witness, we can take the consent from the participant in presence of his witness, his or her witness. This is very important thing. This question is actually important and can be asked in the waiver section. That is why the witness is required. Why the witness is required. So the witness is required actually in to three things. And the witness is required first when the LAR, that's first when the participant is illiterate, or we can say is not capable to understand the research, and also his or her LAR, legal authority representative, is also not able to provide or is not able to understand the research. Then we can take an impartial person who does not belong to the person and also does not have any connection in any means to research. Then we can take the consent from participant in his presence. So we can take this person as a witness. Okay. Then researcher should administer tests of so researcher, he should do some test and should ensure that the participant has understood the things and has understood the research. If the participant will participate but is not willing to sign or thumb impression or can't do so, then the verbal consent approved from ethical committee. Okay. In presence of impartial witness who should sign and date consent. So this is the second thing. For example, if the person cannot sign or cannot do thumb impression or is not able to do so, then the verbal or oral consent prior approved from ethics committee. Okay, prior ethics approved from ethics committee, and in presence of impartial witness who should sign and date the consent document. So next is the documentation of informed consent process. So we have to document. We can document how we can do documentation. Documentation can be done either in hard copy, soft copy, or electronic copy. So these are the methods by which documentation can be done. And electronic consent is that any online consent, either it is in the video form or in the text, or either in the kind of interviews, interactive sessions like podcasters. So like that's electronic consent. And specific issue in consent is that in case of the vulnerable population, there is special provisions which must have to follow in order to take the informed consent. Then last one is the waiver of the consent, where we can waiver of the consent. That's why the consent we can say the voluntary informed consent we can exclude. So first, in this case, in any research where this informed consent is scientific, first it should be scientifically justified that the informed consent is here the possibility that informed consent can either it can lead to like modification or change of the study design, or is so in this kind or is kind of sensitive data. So like in these cases, if we need to waiver of the consent, informed consent, then first we have to apply for to the ethics committee. That's the researcher can apply to the ethics committee to waiver of the informed consent if research if the research involves minimal risk, less than minimal risk. That is less than minimal risk. Okay. So the conditions for granting waiver of consent is like in case of retrospective studies, where the patients or participants actually are de-identified. In case of retrospective studies, research in anonymized biological samples, research on anonymized biological sample and data, and certain public health studies or surveillances, research on data that's available publicly, and research during humanitarian emergency. This is important. During humanitarian emergency, we can waiver of the from consent informed consent process. Then reconsent or fresh consent. Why we have to take reconsent or fresh consent? So if any new information is available on the research study, which may change the risk benefit ratio, or if the patient is unconscious and then after sometime it becomes conscious, then we have to take reconsent. And if the child becomes adult during the study, and if there is long-term follow-up or requires extension study, or in any change related to study, we have to take reconsent. Then after consent form, that's the procedure after consent process. After the consent process, the participant should be given a copy of that's PIS, participant information sheet, and ICF, that's informed consent form. Then in some cases there are some special situations like gatekeeper consenters, like there is a group or community where we cannot take the individual consent, then we can take the gatekeeper consent. That's the consent from the head of the community or the group, and this gatekeeper consent should be also witnessed, and also community consent must be meet, community consent, and the community consent, it should the quorum must meet, and also still individual consent is important, and consent from the vulnerable groups. These are the special situations. Then consent of studies using deception. So deception, actually deception means the word deception actually means to hide the reality, or we can say, yeah, to hide the reality, or to mislead. They are to mislead. This is an important thing, to mislead. So there are some of the research and designs where we can which requires deception, which requires deception. So there are some research studies which requires deception. Deception means the informed consent, the informed consent process. So there is no clear-cut information about the research. The researcher does not provide a clear-cut information about the research while taking voluntary informed consent. Instead, he can kind of he can do kind of a mislead, and this should be justified, and it requires also ethical approval, justified ethical, and requires ethical approval. And but the research is important. So in these cases, and true informed consent cannot be taken. And in these cases, like true informed consent can do, if we take the true informed consent, it can it may lead the modification of the study, or modification in the study design. In these cases, in these situations, we can take we can use deception. Okay, we can use deception. So ethical committee should review and approve. First, it should review and approve, and it consists of two-step consent. It is actually consists of two-step consent. Initial consent, it's compromised. Initial consent is compromised. We cannot provide the exact information, so that can be compromised. And then second consent, while we can take second consent, during second consent we can debrief the things, debriefing about the research. So this is all about that's information consent process. So hope you like this video, and thank you.